Okay. Thanks everyone for coming back from lunch. I'm glad to see that there is at least a reasonable crowd here. I know it's after lunch, so hopefully my presentation will keep you awake because I tend to go to sleep after lunch. So it's always good to come back to Istanbul. I love coming to Istanbul, not only for the people and the food, but when we're talking to customers in Turkey, what I find out is that the customers in Turkey are very mature in their thinking, very mature in their understanding of technology. While I like that, but it's also a challenge because they challenge the vendors like IBM, and I'm sure of those of you who are in the audience that are also vendors, you recognize that you get challenged as well. So IBM works around the world like many other vendors, but what I want to share with you today is some of our experiences around urban safety. You'll see a lot of presentations that talk about crime statistics or statistics that are related to safety. Some of the statistics that you don't normally see, though, is what's the cost of that crime? What's the cost of a city not being safe? So if you do see statistics around that, then typically you will see it related to what's the cost of running a police department, what's the cost of running a corrections department or a justice department. And you can see the numbers here for one of these cities, around $3 million for one male criminal that goes through the system. So you can see that's considerable, but I think we understand that that cost us in that fashion. What you may not know or you may not fully appreciate is what does that cost us in terms of economic benefits, social benefits to the city, what's the impact of not having industry come to your city or your area because you have an unsafe environment. So this is really the critical effort that we've done some research over the last year to determine what are those factors that help reduce the crime or improve the safety in a city, and what is the return on an investment? Where do I spend my budget? Do I spend it on traffic safety? Do I spend it on more police officers or more security officers? Where do I spend that? So we want to talk a little today about that ROI, that return on investment, in one of the areas where we see through our engagements where you have a very high return on investment, and that's analytics, which a lot of the speakers have talked about today. Being able to leverage that data, optimize your resources. And one of the elements that came out of our studies is this strategic roadmap. And you can see at the bottom left-hand corner there that this all starts with data. We have lots of data. We just need to get access to it. The previous speaker talked about some of the traffic data. Once you get that data, I want to put it in a form where I can understand it and I can increase my situational awareness. That means what's happening in the city in terms of events. If maybe I'm going to host the Euro Cup or the World Cup, or I'm going to host the Olympics, what's happening in the city in terms of events, what's happening in terms of transportation, and then what's happening in terms of any type of safety events that take place. The outcome of that is essentially I can make better decisions, and I can have better decisions about where I want to deploy my resources. Now, I don't think any of this is rocket science for you all, but certainly in some of the areas we engage, they have a lot of data and they don't know how to make the roadmap. I think Istanbul's probably fairly high up on this particular roadmap, but in any case, this was a common thread in all of our engagements. So let's look at some of the economical benefits. And this is data that comes from a U.S. city where we looked at the cost of operating a police department. And so you can see the traditional items that you may expect: employee efficiency, agency cost savings, what does the criminal justice system cost us? But some of the things that came out that were a little surprising is, what is the victim cost of a particular crime? And what's the societal benefits? Meaning I have more events or more people wanting to visit my city from, let's say, a tourist aspect because I have a safer environment. And we did some calculations. And in this particular city, which was a fairly large city, this police department had about 4,000 employees. But if you add up all of these different benefits, there was about 200 million of economic benefit that was tied up in this city being safe. So you can see this is definitely an area where cities like to invest. The question is, how do we invest? Where do we invest? And as we're seeing our engagements, those cities that take advantage of information, so they leverage the information, they're able to anticipate problems. If they see a particular crime statistic going up in one area, I can move my officers. If I see some activity on a terrorist network, I can take actions to preclude that. If I see something happening on transportation where I'm having a high number of accidents in a particular intersection, how can I improve the safety of that intersection? And it all comes down to how can I better coordinate my responses. Looking at this in a different fashion, and I like this diagram because it's very simple for me to understand, and that's we have lots of data coming in. We have loads of different type of data. The question is which of these data are important and which ones do I want to take action on, and that's where the center element comes into play. If we can do the analytics on this data, let's forget about things that aren't important. Let's take advantage of things that are important, and then finally, we want to take some action on that. So leverage, anticipate, and then coordinate the response. So whether you are talking about solving a traffic issue, traffic safety, criminal activity, social fraud within a social system, all of these things come into place. Take the data, analyze it, and then coordinate the response. So I want to look at 3 areas today. Very briefly, we'll talk about how you leverage data to attack, let's say, a criminal activity or perhaps some terrorist activity. Now, I understand that that doesn't necessarily fall under the municipalities in Turkey, but there are things that do. For instance, if I have social programs and I have fraudulent activity that's taking place in those social programs, the same type of approach applies to that. We heard today, earlier, that there are lots of cameras in our cities. You heard the number count from Jeff Rhoda in London. I know there's lots of cameras here in Istanbul. If you just look at the traffic department, lots of video cameras. The question is, are we leveraging those as sensors? Are we gaining full advantage of that information out of those video analytics? And then lastly, every citizen in this room is a sensor. You see things. You tweet about them. You talk about them on Facebook. You send text messages. So every one of us in here could be leveraged as a sensor. Maybe it's something as simple as reporting a hole that's in the street or from a transportation safety. It could be there's a big accident on the motorway going to the airport. So citizens as sensors and being able to leverage that is a critical element. So you can see the diagram there. We have lots of information. Everyone has this information. So how do we take this information and, let's say in the case of either some fraudulent activity in a social program or it could be criminal activity, how do we find out and make the connections between who is in that network, who is the ringleader of that, and where do I focus my efforts? You can also take advantage of that and say, geographically speaking, where are these events taking place? And now I can start to make some smart decisions about where I deploy my resources. If I know that I'm having a lot of traffic accidents in one particular intersection, then I want to do something about that intersection. Maybe I want to divert some traffic. If I have a high crime rate in one particular area, maybe I shift my officers to that area. And then finally, you can connect not only the network of people in the geographical area, but we can connect this to objects. So now we start to get a full picture of what's happening in this data and being able to pick, shall we say, a needle out of a haystack to find out where do I need to focus my resources. So let's look at the next area, video analytics And there's a lot of our engagements talk about video surveillance, but we need to go beyond that. Video surveillance has been around for a long time. Now that we're talking about digital cameras and digital systems, there's a lot more information in these cameras. So if you look at the top photograph in the top right, there's a lot of data in there that the human eye is not going to detect. So we have visited a couple of command and control centers. There's 80, 90, 100 cameras. So the question is, we have people that are reviewing these. Are they able to extract all of the data and information that's in that field of view? And so if you look at the next two diagrams, we can start to detect how many people are in this scene. From a transportation perspective, I can say how many people are using this bus. If it was a crime scene, I can start to count the number of witnesses that may have been around that crime scene. And in terms of transportation, I can start to count cars. Maybe there was an incident that took place at this time of day where the criminal was in a yellow cab. So now I can do very quick searches to say, at this time of day, how many yellow cabs came by this point between 3 o'clock and 3:05. And if you look, I'm not sure you can see that bottom left diagram, but it shows the ability of a human to detect some sort of significant event in a video, and it drops down by 95% after 22 minutes. So even if it is an event that the human can detect, their ability to see that really drops off. So video analytics is an area where we can use existing systems and existing infrastructure to extract information. So in this case, it's the same type of pattern. We want to leverage information, anticipate problems, and then coordinate the response. In this case, we're capturing the video. We want to use the analytics to find out if there's anything that's happening in that video. We want to decide, is that something that's important? And then we want to take action. So you can see that this pattern is common amongst all of these areas. So, the citizen as a sensor. There are a couple of news reports that I thought were very interesting that came out of London and New York. There was one case where we had a female that was trapped in a particular place in her house. She couldn't get out. She had her phone, and she posted on Facebook, I'm having a problem here. Can someone please come help me? And then in another case, there was a crime that was taking place, and people were taking pictures of the actual criminal, and they put it out on Twitter. So you can see a lot of metropolitan areas are starting to use this, the citizen as a sensor. Maybe it's to report things, a traffic accident. Maybe it's to report as a crime. Maybe it's the city is trying a new event or trying a new idea about an upcoming event, and they want to see what is the sentiment of the citizens of the city. So there's a lot of data that's available just from your citizenry. So Jeff talked a little today about some of the examples. He talked about New York, Edmund Police and the UK Ministry of Justice. There are loads of examples out there where cities are starting to take advantage of this data. They're starting to take advantage of data that we traditionally don't use, like the video analytics. And from our experience, from a return on investment type of perspective, this is one of the areas that has a high rate of return, and it's a very quick rate of return as compared to much larger types of engagements. So with that, I know that was very quick. I'm going to be around for the rest of the day. I'd be happy to take some questions at the break. Thank you very much.